Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really important topic: why celebrating linguistic diversity is at the absolute heart of building strong, inclusive schools. When we truly value the languages families bring with them, they feel welcomed, they feel respected, and they're ready to jump in and be a part of their child's education. So it all really boils down to this one question, and how we answer it has a huge impact on a child's entire journey through school and life. This isn't just about being nice or polite. This is about laying the actual foundation for a student's success. To get why this is so critical, we've got to go back to the very basics of how we learn. Why is a child's home language not just a nice to have, but an absolute must for their brain to grow? Well, the answer comes from the work of a pretty brilliant psychologist. So this guy, Lev Vygotsky, he showed us that kids don't just learn in a vacuum. Learning is social. It's happening in every single conversation, every story, every interaction they have. And what's the main tool for all that interaction? It's language. A child's home language is their very first toolkit for understanding the whole world. Vygotsky also gave us this really cool concept called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. Just think of it as the perfect sweet spot for learning. It's that space between what a kid can already do by themselves and what they could do with just a little help. And that help, that guidance from a parent or a teacher, it's almost all delivered through language. Language is the bridge that gets them from what they know to what they're ready to learn. And here it is, straight from the source. This just says it all, right? When we honor a child's home language, we are handing them the most powerful tool they have for their own thinking and learning. So trying to suppress that language, it's like taking a hammer away from a carpenter, right when they're about to build something amazing. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this play out in the real world, in our schools today? Well, it all starts with recognizing who our students are, and this is huge, how we talk about them. The words we pick matter a lot. So there's been this really important shift in thinking from what's called deficit-based language to asset-based language. For a long time, you'd hear terms like limited English proficient, but think about what that says. It frames the student by what they supposedly lack. Asset-based terms like English learner or multilingual learner totally flip the script. They celebrate the fact that these kids are adding a new language to the one they've already mastered. It's a skill, not a weakness. And we are not talking about a small group of students here. As of fall 2021, almost 11% of all public school students in the U.S. were English learners. That's more than 1 in every 10 kids in our classrooms. This is a huge and growing part of every single school community. And this chart here gives you a little snapshot of that incredible diversity. You see that big bar on the left? That's Spanish, by far the most common home language. But then look at the others, like Arabic and Chinese, which are next in line. It's a great reminder that our schools are home to this amazing mix of languages and cultures. Now that we see just how many multilingual families are in our schools, we have to ask a really important question. What are our responsibilities to them? And this isn't just about what's nice to do. There are clear legal requirements in place to make sure every single family has a fair shot. This story, wow, it just shows you what's really at stake. Can you imagine being a dad trying so hard to help your kids learn during a global pandemic, but all the crucial information from the school is in languages you don't speak? It's completely isolating. It stops parents from being the partners that schools need them to be. And that father's experience is exactly why these laws exist. Federal law is crystal clear on this stuff. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act basically says language access is a civil right. And other major laws like IDEA for special ed and the Every Student Succeeds Act all say the same thing. Schools must communicate with families in a language they can actually understand. It's not optional. But, and this is a really big but, providing that access means using the right person for the right job. Bilingual staff members are absolute gold for building relationships and for those informal day-to-day chats. But for the formal, legally required meetings, like an IEP meeting or a disciplinary hearing, you have to use a trained professional interpreter. That's how you guarantee accuracy and impartiality. They're not the same thing, and you can't swap them out. Okay, so following the law is the baseline. It's the floor, not the ceiling. But how do schools go beyond that to create places where families don't just have access, but they feel like they truly belong? Let's take a look at what that actually looks like. I love this story about the Demir family because it shows what's possible. Look at these steps. They're simple but so powerful. First, the school got the basics right with translated forms. Check. But then they went further, bringing Turkish culture and books into the classroom. And finally, they created a bilingual environment with labels and phrases. And the result? The student felt confident, and her family felt seen, welcomed, and deeply respected. That's a huge win. And what's so great about this is that none of these strategies are rocket science. Any school can do this. Things like hiring staff who speak the languages of your community, putting up signs in multiple languages, celebrating different cultures. These are all high-impact ways to build a community where everyone feels like they belong. So we've covered the theory, we've looked at the data, and we've walked through the strategies. But it all really comes down to one final, powerful shift in how we think about multilingualism itself. This last story is just heartbreaking, and it gets right to the core of everything. Mariela comes from this incredibly rich linguistic heritage, her indigenous language Mixtec. But because of the prejudice she faced in her own life, she's actually afraid to pass it down. Society has sent her this terrible message that her language is a problem, a liability, instead of the beautiful asset that it is. And so that becomes the challenge for all of us, right? How do we change that message? When our schools and our communities go out of their way to celebrate every single language, we're doing more than just following the law. We're sending a powerful signal to every child that their heritage matters, that their identity is something to be proud of, and that being able to speak more than one language isn't a deficit, it's a superpower. Thanks for joining me.